Hi, everyone. My name is Tatiana, and welcome to the Tech Talks by the Collab Lab. Today's session is Intro to GraphQL with React. But first, just a few words about the Collab Lab. We are a nonprofit that is completely free to participate, and we provide skills training to early career software engineers. So we don't teach people to code, but we try to teach them collaboration skills that are needed in a real world job environment. So things like pair programming, writing PR descriptions, merging code, doing code demos, doing code reviews, doing retros, all of the things that you will see in the real world. And if you want to find out more about our program, you're welcome to go to our website that's listed on the screen. And with that, I am going to hand this over to Rachel, who today is going to be our host.
Okay. Hey y'all. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm not gonna lie, I am a little bit nervous, but I'm gonna do my best. All right, let me share my screen. Okay. So okay, cool. So what we're doing today, it's going to be an introduction to GraphQL with some React. I added the some, but that will come at the end. Just real quickly, and then I guess I can put it in slideshow, but I kind of wanted to go back and forth between some of the screens. So let me make sure you guys can see, but just real quickly, how many folks have any GraphQL experience, if anyone? Okay. I'm assuming, I can't see the chat, but I'm assuming I don't hear anyone speaking up or raise their hand. So I'm assuming that's none. Oh, wait, there is the chat. Sorry. Okay, I saw it right there.
Yeah, one person, I think.
Okay, cool. No, that's good. That's a good place because I think, all right. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to talk a little bit about me. So my name is Rachel Fischoff. I use both she, her, and they, them pronouns. I am based in Durham, North Carolina. I had worked at Code the Dream, which I know is a nonprofit based in North Carolina that has coding classes and also has apprentices and devs in a dev shop working for them. I actually was a participant in the Collab Lab. And I, for a while, helped ran the Tech Talks. So this is like a fun full circle moment for me. I also, before that, I'm a career changer. I had gone to a boot camp based in North Carolina, and I'd done some volunteering with Out in Tech for queer folks in tech because I'm queer, and with the accessibility with the Ally Project. I currently work at Corvus Insurance, which is an insurance tech startup based out of Boston. I've been there for about a year and a half. I'm a full stack developer. I'm also a project lead, which I can talk about more if people have questions later. We actually are a fully functional programming shop. So we use Elm on the front end, which not many people have heard of, which I've heard some people describe if Redux and Haskell had a baby, but we use GraphQL to communicate between our client and server. We use Elixir on the back end, which is similar to Erlang, if people are familiar. And then we use Ecto as a wrapper with our Postgres database, and we deploy to AWS. I have been working on a project based out of the EU for almost the past year. So I've been learning a lot about internationalization and localization as well. Just so folks have that. And then what we don't use Agile or Waterfall. We use something called ShapeUp, which was started at Basecamp. And basically what happens is we have 5 weeks where we do discovery and then 5 weeks where we build, and we're constantly in discovery and build. And so that's how it works. And I actually organize and lead our CDCs, which are our version of Tech Talks, which is just a skill that I was able to develop being at Collab Lab and bring it over there. Okay, so that's me. And then our agenda today, we're going to learn about GraphQL. We're actually going to look at the GitHub GraphQL API in Explorer. We're going to compare GraphQL with Rest, and then we're going to learn how to integrate it to React for efficient client server communications with Apollo. Apollo is how we use GraphQL with React. And just a heads up, I'll let Tatiana know, I have not really coded in JavaScript in a year and a half or really used React that much. I do use GraphQL all the time, and because it's just a querying language and it's not specific on language, it's not specific on the language, just how we interact with it is like more language specific, that like the way that I'm writing queries and mutations and schemas and all that is the same. So, but yeah. All right. And then so I made a small repo that basically it has a few different things on it. I'm gonna link it in the chat. So it has well, first, when we're like interacting with the GitHub Explorer, we can like create an issue on this repo. So let me, and then beyond that, I put some examples in it for, oh my God, I don't know how to use Zoom. Where is the chat? There it is. Wait. Where did it go? Sorry, y'all.
I think if you click on more in the
There
it would be, I think, at the right-hand corner.
There we go. Yeah. I'm just gonna keep it open so I can see it. Nope, that's just the repo. That's just the word, not the link. Okay, let me get here. Then I put some of like the examples in the in this example README file, but I also like what I was saying we could do look together is like the code from Apollo's example. So like this, and I'll link y'all there as well. But like this getting started with Apollo is what the React app is in that repo. But it's like I didn't create I just like went through these steps so we could go together. But yeah, so that's that. And then yeah, we're gonna look at this repo. We're gonna talk about the GitHub Explorer, the examples, and then the Apollo example. So what is GraphQL? So like React, GraphQL was developed by Facebook in 2012 and then open sourced in 2015. GraphQL is a query language and runtime for APIs, application programming interfaces. GraphQL allows clients to specify the data that they need from the server and receive exactly that data and nothing and more. And this is a contrast to REST APIs where endpoints are predefined and the server decides the structure of the response. And this eliminates the need for multiple REST API endpoints and minimizes overfetching and underfetching. And so some key concepts in GraphQL, we have the schema, which defines the data types, relationships, and available operations. Heads up, the operation is either going to be a query, a mutation, or subscription. I put subscription in bold because we're not going to talk too much about it. I did link at the end of some links to subscriptions, but I don't usually use them that much on my day-to-day, and I just figured we'd keep to queries and mutations, and and we'll describe the operation you're doing. Queries are used for reading data from the server. That would be if we're thinking of like the CRUD operation, it's going to be the read operation. And so when the clients request the data they need, mutations are used for modifying data on the server. So that's going to be your create, update, and delete. And then the subscriptions are real-time updates, and clients can subscribe to specific events. And don't mind that repo. It's just like a bunch of, it's not right. It's a bunch of notes. Okay. And so let's talk about a schema. I know this is a lot, but I'm just going to get through it and then I'm going to show some examples so it doesn't feel so abstract. So the GraphQL schema is composed of the three main building blocks. We have types. Types are a representation of an object or a piece of data that the clients can query. There's several different types. Some common ones are the scalar types, which can be an ID, an integer, string, float, Boolean, a lot of primitive data. Object types, which can be multiple field, and they can include scalar and like other object types as fields. The enum type, which is a fixed set of allowed values, such we use enum types a lot in my day-to-day work, both in GraphQL and just in Elixir. But like, let's say we're looking at like the status of something and it's like you're subscribed, unsubscribed, canceled. Like there can only be like three possible options. That would be like an enum type. I think they're also used in TypeScript. I'm not sure if folks use TypeScript here at all. An input type, which is represent the input arguments to mutations or queries. We have fields, which define the data that can be queried on each type. And then the operations, and it's how the clients interact with the GraphQL API, and those were the queries, mutations, and subscriptions. So I know that's a lot, so let's look at some of these. So basically GitHub has a GraphQL API, and they have an explorer where you can actually like make calls. And so and it's like a sandbox environment, and it's set up with like your auth and everything. And so I've been playing around in that, and I thought we could like look at that and write some queries, mutations, and documentation, and look at how it's like self-documented, which all GraphQL APIs are. But I'm going to stop really quickly and just, if anyone has any questions at this moment, or we can keep going. Oops, that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to stay in the Explorer. No, did it? Sorry, y'all. Oh no, this is not what was happening a second ago. Give me 1 second. I don't want to go home. I wanted, okay, overview, reference. I did not know it had. I'm really sorry. All right, here is my Explorer. Okay, this is what I wanted. I like didn't want this. Okay, so it's basically the sandbox, like it said, this is like real live production data. And like, so this is what a lot of the GraphQL kind of, oh, I know what I got totally distracted. Okay, nothing to chat. So what I was saying is all GraphQL is self-documented. And what it means by that is like, if you look at any of the API endpoint, on my day-to-day, I'll use something called GraphQL, which is but you can also use Postman to do this, or like whatever you are, if you want to call APIs. But this, so you can see what all the possible queries are, all the possible mutations, and all the schema types that we were just talking about. So like one schema type we're going to be using is, I think I'm going to do the like, was like the add emoji, add reaction. Yes, add reaction input. And so what I need is a subject ID. When you have it with the bang, like the exclamation point, it means like it's not null. So I need the ID, the content reaction type. And then if you go this, it will tell you more about it. So like the reaction type, it's an enum. We were just talking, it's an enum value. So what that, it can be a thumbs up, a thumbs down, laugh, hooray, confused, heart, rocket, and eyes. And to just explain basically what that means is I created this like issue, and we can like, I was thinking we could create some issues or interact with the GitHub UI in real time. And then through mutations, I created the issue from the GitHub UI, but I was able to add these two emojis through GraphQL mutations, and then also query it for all these. I just put random labels on. It's not a good first issue or help wanted. And then I could query for the labels and see what those were as well. So the way that the Explorer works, so like, I'm just gonna really quickly, okay, my login, that's me, Rachel Fischoff. And so like that is the basic query and then the data returned is this of the viewer. If I was looking, I was just like, let's say I wanted, this is like a specific query where it's like number of repos. And then you can return, you need to put in like an integer for a number of repos, and that means that it's a variable. So then in my variable, I would put in like, let's say I put in 1, and then I'm going to see how many repositories I have. And this is it's just like the most recent is this is a repo I was working on. So then if I wanted to do like more, I would do more. And that's kind of how like querying, basic querying works. And like this, because it's a query language, like this looks the same if I'm interacting with JavaScript, if I'm interacting with Java, if I'm interacting with like Python, Elixir, like any of that, like this is how it's gonna look. So that is one thing that I find to be really cool about GraphQL, to be honest. And so what the basic, so yeah, so just also, even though, yeah, so then the mutation, we're saying is like we're adding the reaction. The mutation is going to be when we're like creating, updating, deleting actions. And this was like an example of, okay, you can like, when we go back to like what the heart could be, I think when we were looking at what they could be, it could be like a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a laugh, hooray, confused. So if I want to add any of these emojis to that issue that I just said, because I was querying for that issue and I found out you can find issue by, sorry, it has a find issue by ID. And so what I need to put in, if I go back, if I go like the query, these are all the different queries that exist, the fields on the root queries. So there was like the finding, it would tell me that like, okay, wait, the repo. Yes. So that I just need to like, the repo object just needs the owner and the name of the repo. And so the owner is me, that was the name of our repo. And then when the find issue specifically, what I'm calling that by ID, and then I need the issue number. And that is also self-documented here. So then when I went to find it, because it says it was like 10, like I was thinking if someone wanted to create a new issue from this repo, if anyone wants to live, we could do that. And then we could like add some emojis. I don't know if anyone is into that and wants to raise their hand. If not, we can just like keep going. Okay, we'll just keep going. So like I'm gonna add a different emoji to the specific one. So I queried for it, I found its ID, and then actually when we look at our history, I have the add reaction to issue. The history already has that ID. So then, but what I'm gonna add is like, I think it's a thumb, and it's gonna autofill. So I'm gonna add a thumbs up. And it's like, okay, the content was a thumbs up, this was that, it returns. And then when we go to look at our issue, now there's a thumbs up. So that's what I was able to do with that. So yeah, it's just like an alternative way of doing that. So when we looked at this Explorer, we were looking at some queries, some mutations, and just the documentation where it's self-documented. And so some advantages of GraphQL are efficiency. It allows clients to request only the data they need, reducing overfetching and underfetching, which is common in REST APIs. Flexibility. Clients have the flexibility to request data in a single request, even from multiple resources. So all of this, like all of the different one when we're looking at the Explorer, this is just to one API. Like at work, we use one API for everything. I mean, one URL. As opposed to like multiple URLs or multiple different endpoints. It's just one endpoint. And then, so for which can reduce the number of API calls we can make. It has strong typing. So the schema enforces strong typing, making it clear what data is expecting and reducing errors and ambiguity. You even saw when I was trying to put in the emoji, I couldn't just put in anything. It had to be like specific from that list. So that's like reducing errors because there's only like a necessary amount of emojis we can add. Versioning with GraphQL, versioning is less of an issue since basically you can like add new fields and you can deprecate fields like within that. So if you're even looking at the way it's like set up if we're looking at the way it's like set up with the self-documenting, you can even see versioning within that. So let's say there was like a different version of even the way the object was, or like the query was, it would like within, when we're looking at the documentation, it would like let us know that that was, that had been deprecated. And then developer tooling, it comes with powerful developer tools and introspective capabilities. So it's like really easy to understand and explore it. And so again, we were talking about GraphQL versus REST, and some differences are the data fetching and response structure, the single endpoint versus multiple endpoint, the versioning, and the schema and documentation. And I have a link to a bunch of examples, which I thought we could go through, which is also what was like, it's also in that link to the repo that I put in. So, oh, that's the wrong one. So these are the examples. So it's the single endpoint versus multiple endpoints. Like I was saying, if we're thinking about like a REST API, like you're going to have to make multiple calls to multiple resources, which can cause lots of traffic, versus for the GraphQL, it can be it's just one endpoint. And so if we're thinking of like a typical one where it's like, you know, we have a user that looks like this, we have a post that has all these components. If we wanted to get the user by ID, it would be like this get call. If we wanted to get the post, sorry. Oh. If we wanted to get the post by the user's ID, it would look like this. And so the response structure for getting a user, this is what would be returned, and for getting the user post, this is the response structure. And then you would have to make two separate requests to get the user information from their post. This is something we see all the time. Now in the GraphQL example, we could have it where this type is the user, and then the post is like the non-null list within this type. And then this is what that would look like. And then basically we could create a query where then we were like get user and post, we could get everything from like, we get the user ID, the name, the email, the post, the ID, the title, content. We could also modify this response, where if it's not required, we could just get back the ID and the name, because we only need to like put in the user IDs, or we could just get back the title. Does that make sense on how that would be easier? Cool. And then this is what the response would look like. So yeah, and just like you can fetch both the user information and their post in a single request. As you can see, it allows the clients to specify the specific fields it needs, and avoiding the overfetching and underfetching of data. Yeah, and then as opposed to the multiple endpoints. Something else that can be great, and this was okay. This was for a different one, but we can do that together, is just how the documentation for REST APIs is usually provided externally, and the API needs to be like well documented for clients to interact. Where I was saying with GraphQL APIs, it's all like self-documenting due to their strongly typed schemas. So then it basically offers that contract between the client and the server of the types, fields, and operations. So if you look at like any sort of playground or any interactive environment, you can see. I'm trying to see, I was going to show another example of how this like Rick and Morty one would look, which is a little bit different from, it's like the same process, but it's a little different from the GitHub one. Okay, yeah, cool. So I think that this is like a Rick and Morty random API, and there's an explorer here, and I can look this is just queries, it's not mutations and types, but I can see it's like self-documented here as well. And this is how all GraphQL APIs are set up. That comes with them. And so there's just like an example here of the Rick and Morty. And then, like I was saying, also with REST APIs, the versioning can be done in like the URL, where they'll be like, okay, this is the version 1 endpoint versus like the version 2 endpoint. And then GraphQL like avoids the need for versioning, because you can like just ask for the specific data, but you can also, if you need to deprecate like a specific field, you can make changes to that. So those are like some big differences I did find on this AWS, just like a chart comparing them and maybe why you would use one versus the other. And just some of what we have talked about, how REST is the set of rules that defines that structure, and versus like the query language and the architecture style, and it's like tools to manipulate APIs. And REST can be really is I still use REST. I still use REST when I'm interacting with a lot of external APIs besides like our internal API. And you know, where the resources are well defined. GraphQL can be good for large, complex, interrelated data sources. The multiple endpoint versus the single endpoint is like a huge selling point. The data returned is a huge selling point. The fixed structure versus that flexible structure where we can just get back only the fields we need. And then how the data is defined and structured, because it's strongly typed, we're going to have like less errors. And then even the way the error checking is, with REST, the client must check to see if the return data is valid. GraphQL, invalid requests are rejected usually by the schema structure because they're not fitting in. So that is my summary of the difference between those two. And then I was going to talk about GraphQL in React. And so with GraphQL and React, I think there's a few different wrappers you use, but one of the most common, or libraries, frameworks you use, but one of the common is Apollo Client. And Apollo Client, not only is it for like integrating, but it provides like additional tools that can help manage data fetching, caching, and state management. And it supports both the traditional queries that we're looking and real-time subscriptions. So if we're gonna, so if we're looking at just, again, this is coming from like this basic, this getting started with Apollo React, which I'll put in this. And then I just have it in that repo I shared, but it's also just my code is up so we can look at it together and how it works. But let me just start. Okay, yeah, I have it running. So right now what we have is it's going to say my first Apollo app, and then the data that's coming through, we can see like in the console, it's based on just this random site. What's it called? It's like, check out this fly by GraphQL API. It's like Apollo's Odyssey. It's just a tutorial site. So it has like a bunch of like native locations and information about them to look at. But so when we have like the Apollo client, and we're also going to use their in-memory cache and the Apollo provider, in addition to this JCQL, which is part of the Apollo client packaging, which like basically is like a way to template. So then when we're using that, we can just put the exact queries and mutations in our React app. So before we get into more, if we look like this query right here, this get locations looks exactly like the query I would have in my sandbox, right? Like in this Explorer, when we were looking at like some of like the other queries, it's the same setup. It's just named. And so that's really cool. We can put it right in our app. And so what we're doing, and this again, this is the structure, just following that getting started. We are in it needs like the URI and then the cache to create the new client. And then the client, you can query, you can run mutations. And then like you wrap the Apollo provider in your app. And then the client is getting passed in. And then when we go into our app, we have this we're using this query get locations, which we're using with like the template, and like we're passing this use query. And then I don't have it displayed right now, but we have this function display locations where we're querying from here, and then it's going to have like the name. We're passing in the ID, the name, the description, the photo, and then we're rendering this. So then if I'm going to then if I do display locations, and then and we're going to go through this a little bit. And so then if I display the locations and I go back to my server, you're going to see that I have all this information coming in from that query. So I'm able to see, because I have like the photo, the about, the ID. So then this is like what our app can be. And again, I was just like kind of going through that, getting started with React and Apollo. And so as we were talking about, we're creating the new Apollo client. It sets up the in-memory cache by default. It provides the client, then we're providing the client to the React components, as we saw we were passing in. We have that GQL templating, and then we can use the create client directly to perform any of the operations we like, because it has all of those operations where we can query, we can mutate, we can subscribe. Yeah, and so then we like uncomment on the code, and we got to set up and we got to use the query within React. And then you can also use mutations within Apollo. With this, it's very similar to the way that the use query is. You can use the mutation. So if I was interacting with another API and I wanted to create, update, or delete, the use mutation would be used in a similar way, the way that this is. Except then here it would be a mutation. Like I would write it the way a mutation would. It would be the use mutation for that. And that would be in the app. And then there's examples with subscriptions, which is like real-time live data. But again, I don't really use those as much on my day-to-day. So I wasn't really going to talk too much about those. But yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. No, I'm not going to stop sharing. I'm going to pause to see if people have some questions about just like writing query mutations, interacting with GraphQL, any more questions they have with this, or with using it in React. No questions?
I didn't see any questions in the chat. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you like.
No. Well, that's a lot of what I had. I have given a similar, I can go through more. I feel like I gave a similar talk before and there were so many questions that lasted like over an hour. So I kind of cut it down. But that's we can, yeah, I mean, we can look at other APIs and writing queries. We can play around with the GitHub and see how it is. And then I just have some like conclusions and documentations to how it all works. But yeah, I didn't know if anyone wanted to like to interact like with the like maybe we could like create a new issue, query for issues, and then like add more emojis or add other stuff. You can like, okay, like, so if I'm changing these the way I was before, like these labels that I was using in their Explorer, I think I was, and then it also gives you a history. So I thought I had something, maybe it wasn't in here. Okay, yeah. So then this is the one. So this is a good to see, this was a good example to see how you don't, like, fields are like optional. So this one right here, I'm looking at my repo. I need the owner, I need the name. This one's saying like the last 20 issues. Obviously, I only have one. It's, you can look at like open and closed. I think the states will probably be like an enum, yeah, that you can do. So like I can't just put something random because it will let me know. So it's like closed, yeah, open. And then if I want to like click into what the states would be, I think I can click into it. Yeah, it's just gonna be open and closed. And it is an enum value. Yep. And so then, so if I run this, it's going to come back and tell me I have all these labels. I have bug, enhancement, help wanted, good first issue, and questions for this. It's saying the title, the number, the URL, but like I don't need all of this. So if I just want it to return like the title of the issue and I just like delete this, but still with the labels, then I just get the title. So like one way that I always think of an example of using GraphQL is like like from like a security perspective too, like let's say there's stuff that is on your back end or on your server that you don't actually need to expose it all to the front end. Like you just need your name, right? Even though it's like a big object, maybe it's like in the database and it has so many different things, but all you really want to render on your front end is like test for GSC or test for GQL mutations. Then the only thing that you're actually like passing, like that is the only data that's being transmitted is the title. And so then like, let's say there is like someone who ends up being able to like see your API, or there ends up being some sort of security breach, the only thing they're going to see is that title. It's not going to be any information that is going to that's going to like result in like that you don't like, there's gonna be like no ID or like no personal information. It's just gonna be what you actually need to render on the front end for that example. So yeah. And then I think I don't need to do any of that. No, I think I'm missing, sorry. 1, 2. Oh yeah, the top one. No, this was that example. I was like, and I can do this, but I don't. I think I deleted something I needed, so it's not gonna unexpected end to document. It's not gonna work. Okay. But yeah, I think I could take this node label. Yeah. And then the only thing that's getting past it, because I don't like, let's say I don't want to look at what's happening in terms of the labels. So I thought that was another way. And then there's most likely a mutation to like update the title. So I could like update the title and like I could look in terms of like what mutations there are here. But as you can see, this is for all of GitHub's APIs. So there's like a ton of different mutations, everything from like delete issue, comment, delete issue. I mean, we could delete the issue right now, you know? And again, it's all self-documenting versus like having to look at an external source. There are like examples, but you can kind of like figure it out by just being in whatever kind of environment you are with the GraphQL. Well, I'm going to stop sharing if there's no more questions. But I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat. I'm not sure where folks are in their journey, or, you know, I'm a career changer as well. Didn't start coding till about 4 years ago. And yeah, and if folks have questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. No.
Doesn't look like there are questions.
Okay.
But
well,
this session is being recorded, so if there's anything you'd like to go back and look at again, it will be the recording will be posted on the Collab Lab website tomorrow and on our YouTube channel as well.
okay. Thank you, everyone.
Rachel, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions offline as well. I can share the slides too. Yeah. And a lot of the information, happy to share the slides, is on, some of the information from the slides is on that repo I shared, but yeah, happy to send them to you to share. Oh, do you want me to share the slides now?
Oh, if you can, yeah, if there's a link.
Here's those links.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone is able to have a good few days, and I mean a good break coming up, and yeah, and looking forward to the next Tech Talk.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Take care. See you soon.